Sunday at Mike's podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to show up this evening. So good to be here. Another Sunday night, guys. Another podcast, another discussion. First, always start out by saying thank you so much for taking the time to show up and to listen in, whether you're watching this live or in the rerun. I think we're all right. Here we go. Seems to be back on again. I'll keep my eye on the green light. If the green light goes out, we're in big trouble. All right. Anyway, we got our sound together. Thank you so much, Run Riot. Thank you so much for showing now. This is always fun, switching mics. Well, what it was is I didn't charge them. Thus, another reason why things are probably just going to go south tonight in general. Okay, it looks like we have sound. I am seeing the green light, so that means that we're a go. Um, I'll keep my eye on it. Let's see. Let me make sure that this is running. Yeah, we're doing good. All right. Um, in any case, hey Ben, how you doing? Welcome, guys. Everybody's here. Awesome. Just in time for getting the sound right. All right. Yeah, it's been. I wasn't very well, so I usually write a script or two ahead of time, especially for the weekend, because I don't want to do them on the weekend. But I had nada because I was actually just out of it. Feeling better now, but I was cruising the forums. I hadn't been there in a while, especially the My Les Paul forum. My Les Paul forum is probably one of the ones that I refer to the most. And I was reading through there, trying to determine if there was anything in there that I could bring up to talk about for this podcast tonight. And I came up with Butt Kiss. I mean, I enjoyed the pictures that I saw of the new Epiphones. I heard a lot of the arguments, pros and cons on those, as well as other things. And then it hit me like a bolt of lightning between the eyes. The thing that I want to talk about tonight are the pointless arguments in guitar culture. Because there are a great deal of them. Just take any form, not just the My Les Paul form. You can go to any, you can go to the Fender form, you can go to a couple of others, even the Greco form as well. And you start on a nice thread, discussing a nice topic, discussing something that you say to yourself, okay, this is interesting. And it usually devolves into, a pillow fight with rocks in them. And that's funny to me. I found that to be hilarious. So that's actually where I got the idea for tonight's live stream, tonight's podcast was the most pointless arguments in guitar culture, because there's a lot of them. But as I sat there and I thought about it, and I said to myself, well, why is this? Why is it that in this culture of ours, why do we all devolve into these pointless arguments over things. And I'll mention some of those things. I'm quite sure quite a few of you are familiar with some of the ones I'm going to. Tonight, I wanted to keep it light, keep it nice and funny. Nothing deep, nothing heavy, but a good point nonetheless, I think, um, about the pointless arguments that we tend to make. Now, I'm going to say something, that is interesting coming from me. I really do think that there was some great stuff that came out last year in terms of year. I think that probably 2025 will be the looking, in hindsight later on, we'll know it to be the apex of Guitar Gear because we are certainly seeing um, a lot of dipping off. A lot of companies are closing, legacy companies closing up. In all strata of our culture, we got pedal companies closing up, guitar manufacturers closing up. We have all these things going on, but still, in all, we are making such great advances for the things that are sticking around. And of course, this leads to arguments. It leads to these same old discussions. And, I got into one thread. Well, okay. First, let me not get ahead of myself. There's a pattern that I've noticed behind every dumb guitar argument. And I'm going to call them dumb arguments because for these reasons. First of all, you take a personal preference. Now, I've always said that one man's ceiling is another man's floor. As far as personal preference when it comes to your rig, your amp, your guitar, your bass, your drum kit, whatever, that's a personal preference. And my preference may or may not somewhere meet with yours, touch upon some of your preferences, but essentially we're all going to have our own personal preferences when it comes to things. Um, I did not like the access of the upper frets on a Les Paul. I preferred it better on a Strat. I preferred the body contours and the feelings of a Strat, but I like the double humbuckers of Les Paul. So I built a guitar that kind of met that criteria. Now, there are other guitarists out there who will tell you that is complete heresy to take a Strat and turn it into a double humbucker guitar. I would argue with him that Fender has a whole series called the Paranormal series that is all about that. But in any case, by the way, I heard one of those Paranormal Tele Strat, you know, uh, hybrids on YouTube the other day, and woo, I don't know if it was that guy's amp or something, but that did not sound good. That may be one that is not worth me taking a look at, especially from that demo I heard. But again, personal preference. And then you turn that personal preference into a moral position for some reason. If you think that a tube amp is not superior to, the latest Axe FX modeler, then that's pure heresy, sir. I cast you out of the church of guitar culture. You're excommunicated. Bye. Right? And really, seriously though, it I thought about it reading through some of those threads. It really is people taking it on a moral position level. It's weird to me. It's weird to me. Hans says, I think of Laurel fretboards that is supposed to be bad versus rosewood. Yeah, there's one for you. That's a great. Yeah, keep throwing them out there, guys, because we were going to go through these tonight. We all know. Like I said, we all know of some. The rosewood versus laurel fretboard issue has been a stickler with me. I don't have a moral position on it other than the morality of the company. for what you're charging, you're going to give us this. But other than that, I do have a preference and I do have an opinion. But that is one of those arguments out there that exists. I dislike playing Les Pauls. I sh- I should know I have 7 of them. Because I was gonna say something about dating fat girls, but I'm gonna leave that one alone. And then with that moral position, you then attach an identity to it. What do I mean by that? I mean that means it's like this is my group. Um, then we identify because we are pure, amp purists, and anything that strays outside of even solid state guys have to sit in the corner and they have to raise their hand and ask permission to speak. But the modeler guys are not even welcome in this discussion. And they attach the identity to that group. And then they defend it. Like if you say, well, actually, I've got this little pocket master thing, and to be frank with you, from an audience standpoint, they're not going to know the difference between that $50, you know, little thing as opposed to your Marshall stack. They're just not. And they'll take that as an attack not only on them personally, but also on their musicianship for some strange reason. I saw examples of that in some of those forums. So yeah, really weird thing here that gets into people's minds: a personal preference, a moral positioning, um, attaching identity to that concept, and then defending it like your life, like it mattered in your life, really. I guess in some people's cases it does. But once that set of circumstances happens, then logic goes out the window, and you have again that 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 pillow fight with rocks in it, that occurs on the forums. And it's an incredible thing to me, Amp versus Mahler, you know. This one I would attribute to the identity aspect, those 4 aspects I was laying out there of why people do this. Because this argument isn't about sound, it's about who you think you are. Uh, what do I mean by that? Okay, so tube amps typically identify with tradition, authenticity, and paying dues. I had to lug that heavy amp up on stage, plug it in, play it, lug it off stage, and take it home. Every night, every week. Actually, I literally had to do that myself when I was living in Japan, but that's a different story. But some people will look at that as paying dues. Um, Modelers, on the other hand, mean efficiency, a modern, solution to your sound man's, gripes, and quite frankly, flexibility in terms of, well, I don't have to lug, I'm not lugging just one Marshall amp up on stage. I've got a Marshall, a Fender, a Vox, you know. And the truth of it again gets down to one thing that I learned, because I used a modeler on stage with Asanoki in Japan. I used the amp a few times, just didn't like it, started using a modeler, and I never went back. Sound girl, the girl who was a sound girl at one of the big clubs I love, she just loved me for it because we could always get a nice tone. And I found that a lot simpler than lugging around an amp like I was doing in the earlier years in Nagoya. Most audience can't tell. They can't tell. And you wouldn't either. You look at some of my live recordings with Asanoki and listen to my guitar and ask yourself, was I playing an amp? Was I not playing an amp? Did it matter? You know, And if you're looking at it for authenticity, what I mean by that again is I was mentioning that in the last live stream. I was talking about cats, well, which me are included in that. I'm interested in the history of recordings and what was used and things of that nature, but I don't take it to the level where I feel that if you're not using that, you're somehow shit. I just read an article in Guitar World from Lenny Kravitz and his guitar player, forget his name, and he basically was saying that all modern equipment sounds like shit, and that if you take not just one vintage piece but several vintage pieces and you use them in conjunction with each other, that it's a totally different sound in itself. Now, I thought about that, and having had vintage speakers and vintage gear like my EP3 and some of the other stuff that I've had, I can say that yes, it does produce a type of sound. But is that a paintbrush? No. Is that a paintbrush or is that a color in the palettes for your paintbrush to use? In other words, yeah, it has vintage equipment. I agree with Lenny Kravitz does have a particular sound to it. However, that being said, that sound is not applicable in every production situation. You know, if I was doing rock, classic rock and things of that nature, certainly, yeah, it would work. If I was doing modern pop, then no, I don't think so. I would not. But it doesn't matter because most audiences can't tell. But that's getting into, trying to please other producers. Mike, is there a good Japanese copy of a Firebird 5 or 7? No, 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 nobody, to my knowledge, not Greco, not Tokai, ever got into those. No. I have over 25 guitars. Sweet, dude. And by the way, welcome to the live stream, man. Welcome to this podcast that we're doing here. I have over 25 guitars. I prefer to play guitars I built. I built over 10. My first amp was a tube 200-watt PA head. I just ran a homemade tube screen. My dad built it. Yeah. Again, we really, 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 really are living in the age of butter. And what do I mean by that? When I was younger, we had to build a lot of stuff ourselves. We had to get creative, you know, and the 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 getting into that as well at that time. What you paid a few visits to Radio Shack, and at least if you were in the States, and that culture has been eased out by modern technology. And I think we lost something there. Snob appeal versus pragmatic, good quality gear that will get the job done. Solid states versus two. Yeah, Mike. Welcome, Mike. How you doing? Welcome. Yeah, these are again these pointless arguments that are predicated upon preference of personal preference, moral positioning, uh, identity, and again that bulldog mentality. And most audience again can't tell the difference. I can't say that enough times. If it hasn't sunk in yet, I hate to break it to most folks. Now, I may mean something to you, and that's okay. I can't argue that. Again, that's a personal preference, but in general, in a mix, it means butt kiss. You know, Brand as a personality. I think Gary's guitar, he did a recent a YouTube video, just his last one, I think. I haven't seen it yet, but the title was something along the lines of the end of brands. And brands have become the cult of the new, especially in our culture, has become the cult of personality, man. At least it was there for a minute. You're a Fender person, you're a Gibson person, you know. My uncle Carlton, I asked him about his thoughts about Fenders, and And he said he'll play a Telecaster, but he could never get into a Strat. And in no conversations that I've ever had with him have I ever heard him say that he was this person or that person. It was whether the guitar fit what he, fit his style, what he was doing. You know, this is guitar astrology. Is the best thing that I could equate it with. You know, like I'm a Pisces, I'm a Gemini, I'm a Fender, I'm nobody says I'm a Harley Benton, or I'm a Chipson. I like warm summer nights, long walks on the beach, and and salsa dancing. The debate survives because brands become shortcuts for self-expression. Wow, that's a mean one right there. If you really think about what I'm saying, it's not because one is objectively better than the other, especially these days. You're not choosing a guitar, really. You're choosing a story about yourself. That's a whole different kind of mentality. Scott says, I worked for a audio video rental company in the late 90s doing concert setups. I granted many heavy cabinets up on stage. Because of that, I don't want a heavy amp. Yeah, I told you the time that I had to set up, and in Japan, there's a Kohai Senpai, and if there was a band that was more senior than me on the bill, I actually had to help them set up their equipment and tear it down. I kid you not. It was worse. Cheers to the guitar crew. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much. My brother builds his own hi-fi. I have much respect for guitar guys that do the same. Sahim 1305. Hey, can I talk to you all about Jesus? Now, I know we all know about Jesus loves us, but do you love him? If so, we must build a connection with him and repent and accept Christ as your personal Lord and Savior. Yes, that's not a bad message here, man. You're always welcome here. Not a bad message spread around. Cat's Music Journey. Yeah, exactly. I think it's more the kind of guitar. The kind of guitar. Yes, the kind of guitar. I understand the Strat, but I'm not there with Les Paul, and you might not ever be. And I'm kind of weird. I can play, the major ones, Les Paul, Strats, and Tellys. I've recorded and played them all. I don't have a preference that way. What I know what it is with me, it's always going to be the neck. It's always going to be a neck. I do not like 50, just for reference, I don't like a 58, Les Paul neck. I prefer a 59 neck. It's not a baseball bat, but it's not that thinner neck that they came out in the 60s. And I like that across the board. I was playing my Strat here today, and one of the things that I'm working on, just getting that neck worked in, if you know what I mean. And I love that heavy neck, that thick neck on it. Again, personal preference though, but I'm not going to go out there and be offended if somebody says they like a thinner neck. I understand the Strat, but yeah, I'm not there. A new guitar for me yesterday. I got another Jackson Warrior. Nice. The X Series, 24 fret. Very nice, Scott. Um, Monster 3262. The rest of the amps I purchased were all solid states. Crate, Randall, Marshall. Yeah, my dad was a twin reverb with the Telly and Strat. That's a beautiful sound. That's a beautiful sound. One of the most beautiful sounds in Americana is a Telecaster going through a twin reverb. I can dial it in using my Boss G10 to play metal. Yeah, I used the Boss. What was that? I got it in here in a box for my live performance. Man, I got a sound that I liked, and then a couple of sounds, and it had a tuner there, so I could tune in between. It was a lot easier than lugging an amp around. Kit Kats, welcome, sir. A great start makes me feel the same way. Jet from the UK Gladiators did it when I was a kid. Yeah, man. Also strings. Yeah, we're gonna get into that. That's the next one. You know, is strings, picks, and micro obsession. Micro obsession. Things matter because obsession with the microscopic differences often shows up when players are avoiding bigger and harder work. Time, feel, phrasing, dynamics, and musical decisions. You say, what are you talking about? What does that have to do with string gauge? Well, you can't string gauge or cable swap your way out of playing. The argument survives of, well, the nines sound better than eights, eight and a halfs are better. No, I gotta have 13 gauge and stuff like that. This argument survives because it's an illusion of progress. Oh, I changed the strings on my guitar and it sounds so much better now with eights. That's not progress. That's actually avoidance. I really look at it that way. Famous Rick Beato video was talking about string gauge, and they played all these guitars with all these different gauges. what, what what is the point of this? You know, when I in the 70s, you played heavy gauges. That was just the fact of it. That's why a guitarist, but not everybody, you were somewhere between 9 and 13. Reason why Stevie Ray Vaughan's played 13s. Prince, an unknown fact, played 13s. So much so that Jesse Johnson, who's not a slouch of a guitar player himself, said that he refused to play Prince's guitar because he says he's not going to break his fingers on those heavy strings, that heavy gauge that Prince used. Um, you know, then when you got into the 80s, the lighter gauges became popular because speed and flexibility, bending, Van Halen effect, I call it, came in. And it didn't matter either way because the guys that I knew who were playing nines in the 70s were still playing nines in the 80s. The guys like me who were playing nines in the 80s are still playing nines now. Okay? In the 2020s. And I never thought about it, cared about it, considered it, thought, oh, you know what I'm going to do for jokes. I put on a set of tens when I don't have a set of nines. I'll play the tens, not my favorites, but I'll play them. Or eventually, what I got into is coming up with my own mixed gauge. Okay, I like to start off really light, but I like to get a little heavier in the middle, and then a little lighter towards the end. There, it's just again, but that was something that developed actually over just years of not having a complete pack of strings around. I'm going to be honest with you, and then just hey, this is not bad. I like this. This works for me. It's true. Again, these are avoiding bigger, harder work. String gauge never really made me play in time better. They never helped with my phrasing or my dynamics or any of my musical decisions. So therefore, a pointless argument. Pointless argument. I prefer Les Paul. I need tens. Nines give me vertigo. I prefer Les Paul scale length and slightly wider fretboard than Fenders with jumbo frets. Yeah, that's another thing too. Thanks for bringing that up. Actually, Money Monster, because the frets is also a big factor. You see, what they're calling medium jumbos now are actually jumbos. I'm going to be honest. It's just like with clothing sizes. Your girl saying she's wearing a size 2, but I remember when that used to be a size 4. And it's the same thing with frets these days. I One of the things that I love the most and is my favorite by far thing about Japanese vintage guitars from the 70s, early 80s is those frets that they use now. Some people, oh man, those are just too thin and It just doesn't work for me. But you know what? I I articulate best with those. They feel great up and down the neck, and they don't feel like speed bumps. And again, but that's a preference thing. Just just get nines and play. 11s and up is unnecessary. I agree, but again, Prince was playing nines because he knew that Santana was. I'm sorry, 13s because he knew Santana was playing 13s. Again, that's because heavier gauge meant more sustain. They thought that was the thinking behind it, that you lose sustain as you go down. Anyway, pointless argument. What are flat wound strings like? Um, you ever play flat round strings on a bass guitar? It's not a groovy feeling. I detest the sound, the feel of flat wound strings. I think heavy sounds sound better when you tune down a half or full step. Yeah. Dad installed heavier gauges on his guitar, so I won't play his guitars. That's one way of keeping me away too. That's actually brilliant. Dad's a smart man. Um, I was a heavy metal kid from 15 to 22, played 12s and up. Yeah, that's again, I think you're probably doing a little bit of tuning there, maybe. Uh, because even Stevie Ray Vaughan had to come down because he was cutting his fingers up every night. You know, the stories and his uh, his sound tech tells a story that they were taking pieces of skin from his leg and super gluing it, cutting a little piece of skin off the back of his thigh and super gluing that piece onto his finger so he could play. They swear that that story is true. To this day, I find that to be just incredible. It's like, dude, man, just get a lighter gauge. But that's how it is. Always wanted to put flats on my casino, but give it a shot. You rarely see a jumbo fret anymore. Yeah, because they renamed them. That was the point of that. They're now called medium jumbos. Believe me, those are jumbo frets. I know. You're not gonna fool me. Um size two. Anyway, you're not good enough for that guitar. If you learn how to play better, maybe you can earn that guitar. This one is pretending to be wisdom, but it's just another form of gatekeeping. In my opinion, there's no skill to guitar exchange rate. It's just not. I tell the story famously of my friend Steve DeMont. He had one guitar. It was a Black Beauty Custom, a 60s Gibson, Black Beauty Custom. That was a guitar that he started out with, and that is the one that I bet you to this day, if he's still around, that he's still playing. And he's a better player than he was when he got it. There's no skill to guitar ratio. No one earns permission to own an instrument. You own whatever you can, as few or as many as you can. You know, you got too many guitars there, or you've got too few. Again, stupid arguments. You got what you need to do what you got to do, or what you felt like having. You know, again, this is subjective. We take subjective matters and we personalize them to the point where they become a sort of a moral compass. And you really shouldn't do that, because when you do that, you close yourself off to discussion on the point. Again, like I said, and you just bulldog it and defend that position no matter what, because it's attached to you somehow through some kind of, osmosis. you know, this argument about you got to earn that guitar, you got to earn that amp, this exists to protect hierarchy at the table. Again, the metaphor, YouTube is a high school, cafeteria lunchroom, lots of different tables, a lot of different cliques at those tables. Here at the guitar community, that is really a way to protect hierarchy. It reassures people that their place in the pecking order still matters. Can you believe that kid? He's only 12 and he's got, a 59, a 58 Strat. What the hell? You know, I've been playing for 20 years and I got a Squire. So what? So what? You know, that argument goes out the window when somebody picks up a crappy guitar and makes it sound great. A cheap guitar, an inexpensive guitar, and not only makes it sound great, but it makes it gain fame. I love the story. I tell it over and over again about Skunk Baxter and the $25 Guitar Center pickup that he made because he needed a guitar for the Donna Summer sessions. And those guitar tracks on Bad Girl, that whole album, is on a $25 guitar from Japan, a Mozarite. It was in a bin. Okay. Okay. And he could have gone to the wall and he could have picked up. At that time it was the Guitar Center on Hollywood, up there on Hollywood and Sunset. He could have picked any guitar off the wall, a Strat, you know, a 70 Strat, a 70s Gibson, all of them. No, 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 no. He says, hey man, I'm in it to win it. I need to make some money. I need a guitar that's good enough to do this session so I can get paid. I'm not going to get crazy and buy an expensive guitar for this session. Excellent story, guys. It's a foolproof story. Anytime somebody throws out, that hierarchy thing on you, throw that story out. Put that one out there and point that out because all arguments fall apart in the face of that because it's a fact. And it's smart business too. There's also the even bigger lesson there, if I didn't bring it out enough, is that he 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 got the cheapest guitar he could get in order to maximize his payday on that session. And he still has that guitar to this day, by the way. Um I never stick to the norms with my strings. Yeah, give it a shot. Yeah, we don't endorse tour skin grafting. Yeah, man. That is just DIY skin grafting, actually, dude, on tour, man. That is just, I've heard some stories, about guys pulling their own teeth out. Tooth is bad. And Michael Jackson's writer did that, just pulling their own teeth out. And they go on like, oh, my tooth is hurting so bad, and reaching in and pulling it out. That's insane. That happened too. I think my 355 is too good for me. Well, that's again but that's not somebody telling you that it's too good for you. There's a difference in that. That statement is haterade. Hate, 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 hate. I give no, I give nice guitars to the beginner all the time. Good evening to you, Phineas. Good to have you here. We played crummy guitars because that was all we could afford. Thank you. A little reality check here. I'm always going to go back to my days when I was, going around as a kid, and because my dad, was not going to throw that kind of bread into something he wasn't sure whether I was serious or not. And that's a serious thing. And so we had to improvise, and we played a lot of chord guitars. Chord guitars and basses were the backbone of my guitar playing when I was younger, up until I got my first Squire. Um, Noel Gallagher voice is playing stadiums of inexpensive amps and an Epiphone. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, They even, so much so that Epiphone came out with that model. Wouldn't isn't that was it the sound of the guitar that it was so great, that it deserved that? No. We all know what that guitar sounds like, you know. That's hilarious. It was again the player. My go-to flying V is made from plywood and wood I found on the side road from a desk. I took the parts from an Epiphone Les LP2. Yeah. Um, you know, again, I did what I did. I modified that old Squire SE because I realized that there were certain I got to that level of playing where you get to a level of playing where you start having technical things that you want to have, where off the rack no longer suits you. And that's when you delve into that. Um, I made good money on a Les Paul copy out of a Sears catalog. Yeah, my guitar, when I had to play guitar for the few songs with the band in the cover band in Nagoya was again what was that? Gosh, um, it was a 355, but I forget the name of the guy who made it. Anyway, it wasn't anything at all. Maybe I'll dig up a photo of that and see if I can remember. But and it worked fine. An amp, I did have an amp then, but my amp, those are the Nagoya days with the cover band. My amp was a solid state amp, heavy as hell. Those Sears guitars were fun to play. Yes, that's Jimi Hendrix. His guitar was a Sears guitar for many years. These arguments don't make good players. They don't make better players. They don't make any kind of players. They don't help beginners, and they don't survive in a full band mix. They just don't. I'm sorry, guys. I'm a producer. I've got 7 records out of my own and a lot of TV commercials and a lot of production work, thousands of songs over the years. And I'm going to tell you something in a mix, it means butt kiss. It really does. I don't think, and I'm going to be frank with you, if Lenny Kravitz using the same board in the same studio, if he did a recording of Are You Going My Way using his vintage gear, and he did a recording of Are You Going My Way using modern gear at that time, and he played it to an audience, nobody would know the difference. Nobody would say, oh, wow, that. No, I'm not even going to get into that. Nobody's going to say wow anything. Nobody's going to do it. They're going to say that song sounds good. That's just the truth of it. It keeps guitar culture stuck. When Lenny Kravitz goes on to Guitar World and he makes those statements, he's talking up his stock. Do you understand what that means? It means he's got a bunch of vintage guitars. And he's going to tell you how cool they are. And if you're a young person who's listening to what he's saying, you're saying, oh, that's cool because guess who's going to be the buyer of his guitars when it comes time to sell? He's hoping that, some cat heard that and believes that or thinks that that is the end all to be all sound. That is which it's not. Talking up their own stock, too, a lot of these guys do. And it's arguing about tools instead of music. And the longer that we cling to them, the harder it will become to actually move forward. And here in 2026, when I go online to the My Les Paul forum, guess what? We have not moved forward by any means or stretch of the imagination. We just haven't. Red. Hey, Red, how you doing, sir? Long time no see. I hope you've been well. Thank you so much showing up. Um, I started on an old $5 Silvertone. Yeah, Silvertone. There's another guitar from my past. Um, Instruments are for players, not the music or the audience. Yeah, I agree with that. Cat's Music Journey. Is there a Japanese Les Paul from '81 that has a 59 neck? Anything you recommend? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, those Tokais from I had a beautiful one, and boy, go back into my unboxing videos. Look out where I found that Tokai Les Paul that Black Beauty Les Paul. That thing had what I consider to be the perfect neck. Wasn't thin. The necks on the Tokais were always kind of baseballish. Your best bet for finding that kind of neck, 58, 59, is the Tokais. And the model that, speaking of models, and that would be any model from a 700 and above. Said it for years. Just get a decent Squire and be grateful. that's, that's what I got. I got a. I got a. It's not even a decent Squire. I made it into a great Squire. The treble bleed. The tone just hooked up to the bridge. Double humbuckers, fat neck on it. Not in love with the medium jumbo frets, but I have work them enough to the point where I'm happy enough with them. They'll do. Um, but yeah, I'm good. Whereas I am going to be going to Japan this year in May. It's looking pretty probable that I'll be in Japan this May, middle of May. And while I'm there on the streets, if I can make a deal with some cash in my pocket, I will pick myself up the vintage Tokai or Greco SE that I've been wanting to have. But we'll see. Just because the frets, I prefer those frets. That's the only thing. And then maybe I would just look for vintage neck, to be honest with you. See if I could find an old neck, and then I would just swap necks on this guitar and call it a day. So there may be something. The best neck I play on has been on my Tees prototype. Super comfortable, not a thin shredder, but very playable. Yeah, Red. The thin necks really came in starting from '81 on, getting into wide necks thinned out in Japan. They were only, going to the Japanese are otaku. They're really focused on things, and they knew what was happening in the culture and how it was making that shift, and they shifted. The manufacturers, they're wanting to get on top of that, made that shift as well. They brought those necks down, and they never really went back. That's why I say anything from '81 before 70, 77 to '81 is your good years on anything Japanese. Mike, did you ever buy from private sellers in Japan? All the time. All the time. I had mixed results with them. The two problem guitars that I had, the bass and as it turns out, one of the Grecos that I bought were from private sellers. Um, the other buyers that I bought from were from out in the boonies stores. Any super nice guitar I've had, I've sold to pay bills. Classic musicians. Yeah, that's the thing too. I always put that caveat on it if you can hold on to it. See, the other thing about this Squire SE that I modified is that it's priceless to me, but it's of really no value except for the sum of its parts. Pickups are worth about 200, $300. The neck is worth about probably $50. The body was worth about another 80 to $90. The hardware, and then in that case, you don't have to worry about selling it because you're not going to sell it. And I think that's the other reason why this guitar has stuck around with me. Because as you know, if I got to make a move, I'm going to make a move. And but with a scrap guitar like that, don't have to worry about it. Plus, on top of that, it's pretty damn good. I put it down in that regard, but it's actually the sub. Those are excellent parts. My dad got a Black Beauty LP, but I wanted a pointed guitar, not dad's guitar. Well, yeah, that's going to be the sentiment going forward with a lot of these vintage guitars. Mike, have you ever heard of Shark guitars? Let's take a look here. Shark Electronics, no noise, no limits, just play. Yeah, man. Whenever the guitar starts looking like something that they had on the Death Star, I generally, kind of shy away from. There's a lot of knobs and buttons and things that you can do on this. Um, I believe it. It looks damn good. I like the overall design. I like everything about it, but I'm a simplistic guy, Scott. I'm a man of not too many wild tastes, but it looks good. Exactly, Mike. My modded Donner Les Paul is my favorite, but it wouldn't even break even for the initials. Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't. It wouldn't. I mean, it wouldn't break even on the price of what I get on the parts if I parted it out. But I bought good parts for it, and that is the solution to that. That will break that. So you'll always have a guitar, and you'll have a good one. Yeah. Sorry with me. I realize my position in life. I've enjoyed the glories of traveling the entire world. I've walked the footsteps of Mount Everest. I've walked the seashores of North Africa. I've touched the tip of South America. I've done all these things, but I only got one guitar. I didn't stick any. I didn't stick very long enough to build enough bread to afford more than one for myself personally. But that's okay. Again, it's subjective. It's a subjective thing, and you cannot put your subjective thoughts on other people because that's not your wheelhouse. So I'll leave you with this. Which guitar argument did you care about deeply in the past until you realized that it didn't actually matter? See, one of the wonderful things about the Upstairs to the Right music channel that I've gotten out of it and having discussion with you is I've also been able to work through a lot of my gear psychosis and things that I thought were so maybe even 5 years ago. Now I no longer think that's so. And I went down that path. I'm documented here on this channel where I was buying vintage gear. I was buying really expensive guitars. I was using them in making recordings. And I listened to the recordings that I did when I didn't have that expensive gear. And I listened to the recordings that I did when I was using expensive gear. And thank God that I have that to be able to do. And quite frankly, I cannot tell the difference. The sound is the sound. It sounds like Mike, whether you like that or not. Whether that's something. I hope you like it. Your CD, I hope gets there soon, Mr. Watson. Let me know as soon as that gets in. I'd love to hear back from you that you got that. But it, you know, The Deep End is one of my favorite albums. I guarantee you guys that I was not recording that with expensive equipment, but I like the way it sounds. Whereas, Ants in the Pantry was recorded with extremely expensive equipment. And, you know, these arguments don't make better players. And, you know, they're not worth arguing with over like it's 1995. This is just not. It really isn't. But thank you for sharing that link, Scott. I'm gonna take a little look more, but that I mean, actually, the more I think, I really, really like the design of this guitar. It's just, I get nervous when it has all that stuff on it because those are a lot of places where things can fail at, and and if I took that down to Fern, he's gonna look at it and be like, I can work on it, but do I wanna? Um, The biggest myth I once believed was that budget gear wasn't usable. Yeah, that's such a myth. Brand name on the headstock, it doesn't matter. Yep. Thanks for yet another great Sunday evening, Mike. Much appreciated. Thank you, sir. Take care, everybody. Ben, thank you so much for showing up, man. Cat's Music Journey. I've been meaning to report this live stream for breaking the community guidelines on the awesomeness. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Just look up the Can amp that Dave Grohl used on the first Foo Fighters album. Yeah, again, a lot of these albums were recorded plugging directly into the board as well. So there was no amp, involved in that. The myth of the dependable tube amp. Flame on. Yeah, that's even the other thing is that especially traveling, tube amps do not travel well, kids. Throw it in the back of your truck and you go from gig to gig. I guarantee you are eventually going to show up at a gig and you are not going to have something that's working. It's just not dependable. Well, the beautiful things about state amps and why they took over is because of that. They were far, far, far more dependable. They didn't fail on you. They could travel well. There's a great video on it. Yeah, I'll have to look for that. I picked up a pink PRS that sounds so beautiful that I dropped any preference for color and made the purchase. Yeah. Yeah. Nobody's going to flame you on that. I paid a lot of money for a couple of Jacksons R and Z models, but their average guitars are problems with tremolo. Yeah, I like how Phil McKnight gets into that. I like how he says, "What this is a he'll if it's a $3,000 guitar and there's issues, he'll flame you on it because he just finds that unacceptable." And I do too. Scott, thank you so much, brother, for putting that link up. Mr. Henshaw says, I have a Fender Princeton Chorus from 1991. Been my most used amp for gigs since. Never been in the shop. Wow. Princeton Chorus. Wow. Yeah, guys, just wanted to share that with you. Just those thoughts that, these pointless arguments that we get into and the psychology behind it as well, because quite frankly, we got to stop that. We have to really, really, really stop that. American made solid state. I was running it through the HUM file. I said, is that a solid state? I seem to recall it as being a solid state. Oh, okay. Check the Asanoki and gotta say bravo. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Scott was kind enough to put up the link here. Just as a reminder, guys, is that I have created a limited run of actual physical CDs that if you go to that Bandcamp link, you can click on. And I really, 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 really would thank you so much if one or more of you would buy a CD and support this channel. And it is going to be signed and numbered with a personal message from me on it. And it is good music, recorded with really expensive equipment again. But the thing is that I like the sound of my Deep End album. It doesn't matter. That's when I really learned. Sounds great. Thank you so much. Someone in my own band gave me shit for having a Schecter Telly. I'm not in that band anymore. Yeah, get out of here. Get out of here. That's just silly. So check it out, guys. If I could reach out to you guys just to support this channel, go over there to that link and buy one for me, guys. I would really appreciate it. It would mean a lot to me. and it would really help out. And it's good music. But again, even that is the only one that I ever approach with that viewpoint, with that mindset. Okay, I'm going to buy a bunch of vintage gear, and I'm going to work on this album. And that's the half that I recorded in Singapore, and then the other half I recorded here with the same equipment, but still, almost the same equipment. I went from Gibsons to Epiphones in that case, but in any case, I couldn't tell the difference, guys. I really can't. I really can't. Um, and that'll teach you something. Again, I wasn't thinking about the gauges of the strings or any of those other things. I was really concerned about the production. And I would argue that if I used modern equipment on that album for the first half, like I did on the second half, it still would have sounded pretty much well the same. Been extremely humbled by my life disabilities and the responsibility of the family, but you have my full support and appreciate otherwise. Hey, don't even worry about that, Red. You know, we support this channel, not the CD thing that'll come. That's not going anywhere. That'll be around for a while. But you showing up, Red, and giving love and just popping your thoughts in the chat is really, to tell you the truth, the most support that I could ask for. And that's not just you, that's all of you guys. It's each and every one of you every time we do this podcast. And I just want to thank you for doing it, guys, and listening to my ramblings. Sometimes they are. I like tonight's topic. I think tonight's topic was a fun one, and it was something that we could all pretty much will identify with. I think it's something that, again, in this community, sitting at this table, it's something that at some point or another is going to touch you. Not in the Catholic preach kind of touch you, but in a way you're going to be exposed to. Okay, that's wrong too. You're going to come across these things. And I think that if we act as a different kind of gatekeeper, if we're the ones that say, well, actually, let me slow you down on that. I know you heard that, but let me set you straight on what it really is. I think that going forward, the community, even though it's shrinking, will be a lot stronger for it. We won't be, you know, bulldogging each other. Guys, all right. Thank you so much for this podcast tonight. Thank you so much for having this discussion with me. We will be doing it again coming up this Wednesday. We'll do the Wednesday Night Hump podcast. Peace, love, and soul to all you guys, like Don Cornelius used to say. For some reason, that just popped in my head. Well, thank you guys. Always. Thank you so much for showing up and just being good folks and smart crew. A lot of good points made here in the chat tonight. If you got some more stuff you want to drop down in the comment section, please feel free to do so. Until the next one, you guys take care. Bye-bye.